Hi there. What if Rhaena's dragon was simply changed to be blue instead of pink in House of the Dragon? In the latest episode of House of the Dragon, Rhaenyra gave her stepdaughter 4 dragon eggs to take to the Vale for safekeeping, and this led to a lot of speculation that they're actually the eggs that will eventually come down to Daenerys in Game of Thrones. Particularly because, well, not even speculation, because director Geeta Patel, who isn't a writer, but director Geeta Patel was briefly asked about this in an interview with Mashable, and just quickly said yes. And in context, we were wondering, did she just assume that or not, or whatever. Then she gave a longer interview. But the point is, at first, I was preparing to come on here and give a lecture about how, no, they're not, they couldn't be, and even on screen it doesn't match. Nor could this have been an intended change, and I even scripted all this out. I threw that out, and remade it now. I was saying this couldn't even be an intended change by the showrunner Ryan Condal, because since then new evidence has come out. And not just evidence, putting my own thought into it that there were some other possibilities I didn't consider. Now I think this is actually what they're doing. And notice my choice of words, what they're doing. It is a change, but I'm also not particularly upset about it, thinking on everything going on with this. Now, there are 2 key points in this video. And I'm backlogged because of July 4th holiday. I'm already making this Saturday before episode 4, that when specific issues like this come up that I need to research, it takes more time to make, so I'm doing this audio only. But there are basically just 2 key points in this video. One is that I was confused on a specific plot mechanic about egg colors, but I realized there was a different option that we weren't considering. But that isn't the most important point. I'll get through that pretty quickly. The most important thing isn't even... Point 2 is, does the change make sense? Yes, it is a change. Beyond these 2 key points, the underlying issue after that is how Ryan Condal and his team present changes, and whether or not they even give literary justification for it as part of the adaptation process, or not at all. That standing back on a meta level, how they present a change is more important because Benioff and Weiss just stopped answering questions after a while. But to go through this point by point, and I put a lot of thought into this, late Game of Thrones taught people to stop even asking questions. Like, it's so weird when you try to tell them, do you even think that happens in the book? And they pause and go, I didn't even consider that. That people are just reacting to, well, Arya did that, and do you think that she's killing the Night King in the book? Do you think the Night King even exists in the books? We don't think he does. They were just treating this as the only story, and it stopped comparing it to the books, which is, they wanted you to do that. They wanted people to stop comparing it, because if they did, they'd realize how crazy it was. Season 5 onward. So it taught people to stop asking questions, and the media went along with this. They were just making clickbait. Like, mainstream news was making, like, top 10 things happening in Season 6, and it's like, you're not criticizing the plot holes, and you aren't acting like journalists. They taught people to stop asking questions, so there's multiple steps, multiple questions we're asking here. That you see people just going, oh, cool, it's Daenerys' eggs, and not even questioning it. Though I am positive about this, just, okay, what are we asking here? First question, is this even a change? And then, is it a good change, or does it a change that fits? First one's easy. Yes, this is definitely a change from the books. It doesn't automatically make it a bad change, just it is a change. Let's acknowledge that. And what Benioff and Weiss would do is they'd stop even acknowledging they were changing things, which is, of course, what leads to bad changes, when it's that the steps leading into not questioning it. If you're unfamiliar with this, the issue is that the most recent tie-in book, Fire and Blood, from 2018, which is what most of the House of the Dragon stuff is based on, it's an expansion of earlier prequel novellas. The first Dance of the Dragons prequel novella was 2013, Fire and Blood was the full version, but anyway, The full version of Fire and Blood, which only came out relatively the most recent thing, 2018, had these added chapters to the reign of King Jaehaerys, which already implied that Daenerys' trio of eggs actually come from Dreamfire, her sister Helena's dragon. Moreover, even ignoring that they were more, it wasn't so much stated as heavily implied that they're from Dreamfire, that 3 eggs were stolen from Dreamfire, the numbers just don't match up. This is a change, and I've seen some people go, oh, how do you know it isn't a change? Well, in the book, Rhaena is sent to the Vale with a trio of 3 dragon eggs. This trio, the most recent clutch laid by Rhaenyra's dragon Syrax. One of those 3 later hatches into the dragon claimed by Rhaena that she names Morning, because morning brings the dawn. And Rhaena's dragon Morning is colored pink with black highlights. Just pink I don't think would be cool, but pink with these solid black highlights I think is actually kind of interesting. So, in the book, it couldn't be a trio of dragon eggs sent to the Vale, which later came down to Daenerys, because one of them hatches. There were only 2 left. That this is straightforward, this is something they're adding. In Season 2, Episode 3, Rhaenyra gives her stepdaughter Rhaena 4 eggs to take to safety in the Vale, which are colored green, gold, red, or some reddish hue, I'll come back to that, and a 4th one that's clearly blue, periwinkle blue. Now, egg colors are important because they match the color of the dragons that hatch out of them. Daenerys' eggs were colored green, gold, and red, so many viewers independently suspected, well, we see a green one, a gold one, and a red one alongside the blue one in there. Could these be Daenerys' eggs? And just to avoid confusion, let me spell this out. The color of Daenerys' eggs were simplified in the TV show, so they're not wrong to say these are the color of her eggs on screen. In the books, they were a primary color and a secondary color like the dragons that come out of them. That in the book, Drogon's egg is black with red swirls in it. The green one is actually green with gold swirls in it. They change it, but yes, visually this matches TV Daenerys' eggs. That's fine. You'd expect them to do that if they're the same. Gold, green, red, or reddish, that's what threw me. Now, in the TV show, Rhaena takes 4 eggs to the Vale, not just a trio, but they do explain what the 4th one is very clearly in dialogue. She says, because she didn't send her youngest sons, Aegon and Viserys, with her in the book. She only sent Joffrey. And Aegon has a new hatchling, Stormcloud, they mention that. She states, I am also sending young Viserys' egg with you. So that's where the 4th one is from. It's Viserys' egg. And ultimately, the book's Viserys' egg never hatched. Nor did we ever get a description of what its color was, so it's not like it's drastically changing. This would have hatched into some other dragon or something. Next section here, I have to apologize for on social media in the immediate aftermath of the previews showing these dragon eggs. I was bluntly dismissing people. They can't be Dany's eggs because the colors are wrong. And the counter-argument against me and others was, well, maybe one of them faded into another color, which doesn't make sense and still doesn't make sense. Why would one fade but not all of them? But it's my fault for not considering all the possibilities that while that counter-argument was weak, there are better counter-arguments that my own assertion was really weak, actually. Because, first off, I kept insisting that the reddish-looking one, oh, that must be the pink one. That must be Morning. And, I had tunnel vision on this. I kept thinking, well, no, that's pink in bad lighting. And then it hit me, this isn't pink, this is red, like Drogon's egg. So I kept saying, well, that reddish one has to hatch into Morning, leaving a green one, a gold one, and a blue one, and that blatantly doesn't match the colors that Daenerys had, so they can't be hers. I got this completely backwards. That isn't pink, that is red. And then it just hit me like a truck. That's why I threw out my old script for this video and made this new one. What if the TV show is just changing Rhaena's dragon to be blue instead of pink? That's not even that big of a change. It's just the chain of evidence we were looking at. Okay. Because this wouldn't even be the first time they've changed a dragon's on-screen color. that Vhagar in the books is actually bronze, with jade green highlights as a secondary color. The TV show just made her solid green. So sometimes they'll play around with the colors a bit if they felt it's too similar to another one, we need to distinguish it. I don't know if they think, oh, pink, you think you'd at least change to red if you think pink looks silly, but maybe they thought it looks too much like the other red ones, and there aren't enough other blue ones. And really the only other blue ones are Dreamfire and Tessarian, but fair enough. That isn't really that big of a story change, it's just a visual change of, well, we varied it up to make her blue. So her egg is blue. That is entirely self-consistent and doesn't contradict anything. So my one point of argument, you see, that these couldn't be Dany's eggs, the colors are wrong. Throw that out, yes, they are the same color scheme for the entire trio. This would also, of course, change that Morning would have to hatch from Viserys' apparently blue egg. Not that this matters much, because Viserys' egg never hatches in the show, so... In the books it never hatches, so it's fine. In the show you can do that. That was the first point, that this is a plausible change. The second point, is it a good change, which is a bit more subjective. That I'm standing back and going, why was I so angry? That we had this knee-jerk reaction to any change, but just mentally take that step back, calmly, does this even merit really getting that upset? And just verbalize what was changed that we're upset about. As many news sites already pointed out, thankfully, it wasn't like this was being ignored. Everyone said, but the whole twist is with Dreamfire's stolen eggs, that when the first book came out in 1996, when Daenerys is presented with her trio of eggs, Illyrio told her they were petrified eggs from the Shadowlands beyond Ashai in the far east of Essos. Then, like 20 years later, in 2018's Fire and Blood, Martin put in these new chapters from later in the reign of Old King Jaehaerys, around 40 years before the Great Council. A Targaryen princess's jilted lover, Alyssa Farman, stole 3 dragon eggs from her dragon Dreamfire and fled with them to Braavos, where she sold them to the Sea Lord there to buy ships. Now, Jaehaerys confronted the Sea Lord about this, but in return for forgiving crown debt from under his uncle Maegor, which was huge crown debt, he didn't push it because he said, well, that's a good offer, plus possessing a dragon egg is one thing. Knowing the right magical spells to be able to successfully hatch it is quite another. So I'll react if they meant they'll be risking war, were economically not great, and just, they don't even know how to hatch them, so okay. Now, Fire and Blood specified this trio came from Dreamfire, which decades later bonded with Helaena, Rhaenyra's half-sister. This is why 2 weeks ago, this actually came up already, that we were already getting primed for this. 2 weeks ago on social media, we were upset when Wired did this bad Q&A video with the cast, and got a lot of questions wrong, even though the cast answered them correctly. And some of these were blatantly wrong, like, who was the last rider of Balerion? And they listed Arya, even though, like, the last one was Viserys, and on screen, even just watching the TV show with no knowledge of the books, episode 2, they said Viserys was the last rider of Balerion. And, like, they would subtitle the answers in the Chiron, and they'd even be, like, giving TV show spoilers of, oh, this character dies later. Don't say that in a Season 2 Q&A. That's not happening this season. So you're making all sorts of mistakes in this Q&A, and buzzing that the cast was wrong even when they gave right answers. So that's why we didn't jump on this as, oh, they're changing something. It just seemed like a mistake. Then when they were asked, which dragon do Daenerys' eggs come from? Fia Saban, the Helaena actress, instantly and correctly answered Dreamfire. And it just have this mental image, it was so upsetting. She goes, oh, Dreamfire, and the buzzer silencing her that she gave the right answer. That was mean. And that she was correct. So we were already worked up and complaining this is a mistake, and Glidus on his channel even made a solid video criticizing this Q&A, and one of his points in it was, no, it's from Dreamfire, what are you talking about? At the time, we thought it was a mistake, and that's why we've been yelling about it for a few days, but now that it seems like an intentional change... Well, the difference here is intent versus negligence is really what we're more concerned about. But let's step back for now and ask, why were we annoyed about this? What exactly are they changing? Is it a major change? Well, thinking on it, the main point would remain that it's a twist that, in the books and for TV-only viewers, we were told these were petrified eggs from the Far East that are hundreds of thousands of years old. And no, the twist is they are in fact Targaryen dragon eggs in direct descent from the dragons possessed by Daenerys' family. There's this whole joke that in the books it says that Drogon he so closely resembles the color patterns of Aegon the Conqueror's dragon Balerion that it said that Drogon is Balerion the Black Dread born again, like reincarnated. And the twist, the joke is, he looks like Balerion because he's literally his grandson. That he isn't unrelated to Balerion, oh, he's born again, he's his grandson. That's why he resembles him. Thinking on it, the core point of that twist would survive, because both Dreamfire and Syrax are descended from Balerion, from Balerion and Vhagar, most likely. We never got a full dragon family tree, this is a little bit of guesswork, but it seems like, well, Dreamfire's older than Syrax, she was probably a direct child of Balerion. Syrax might be a grandchild, might be a child, sometimes the eggs take decades to hatch. But it generally seems that both Dreamfire and Syrax are descended from Balerion. And the main point of the twist is that Drogon is a descendant of Balerion, that's why he looks like him. The only thing we're annoyed about, which primed us to be annoyed about it, is this insultingly bad Wired Q&A that seemed really mean to Thea Saban, who accurately gave, oh, my dragon in the books, and she seemed so happy. So it's a bit of a dig at how much we like Helena and the Helena actress, because she's great, she's really funny in the interviews. But in terms of the core theme of the twist, it wouldn't be lost, so I can't dismiss this out of hand. Now, quite separately, I saw Red Team reviewing Preston Jacobs' video on this, complaining that it's a forced connection and, member berries and everything, as they said. But thinking on it, out of universe, for real-life audiences, before Season 1 of House of the Dragon, this was considered a dead franchise. They're only just restarting, and their position is still precarious. They kind of do need to make connections, combined with, again, out of universe, this isn't something Red Team Preston considered, they just ordered a writer to start working on a Targaryen Conquest series script, like a few months ago, Mattson Tomlin. It is in the pipeline, but it's still being written for Season 1 of a Conquest show. And I've said before, I think a Conquest show would run through the Sons of the Dragon era, so that Season 5 would conclude with the death of Maegor the Cruel. And if they want to keep going, like Season 6 and 7 would be the reign of Jaehaerys. And just little things from Fire and Blood in there. So, based on my earlier model, if they were going to do this in live action, the Alyssa Farman stole Dreamfire's eggs thing, it would be in Season 7 of a Targaryen Conquest show, which is only just now starting to write Season 1, and they don't crank out content annually anymore every 12 months. It takes like a year and a half to make flagship shows. So, out of universe, realistically, if we wanted that twist, it would be 10 to 15 years from now. There would be a season of television 10 to 15 years from now, when 5 years is considered a lifetime in terms of television cycles. So, reasonably, I think the question Condal was faced with, that we do need to make strong connections. Just remember the member berries. This isn't like Star Wars where they're just making new installments. Hey, this is some reference to the trilogy. It's this franchise nearly died. This is the first spin-off. And they need to establish things like, the Song of Ice and Fire, that they were secretly guided by this prophecy, which Martin even admitted was true in the books. And they're emphasizing the dagger a bit much, but they kind of need to. Just to establish ties with it's almost 200 years earlier. They need to hype up, here's the wall, everyone, here's Winterfell. I get that, because this was almost a dead franchise. And on top of that, the question Condal was faced with was, Do we leave that open and wait another literally 10 to 15 years real time until the 7th season of a conquest show by the late reign of Jaehaerys to give the twist that the core twist is Dany's dragons aren't from Ashai, they are from the Targaryens themselves. They directly descend from Balerion. That is still technically true, even shifting between Dreamfire and Syrax. Do we wait 15 years to tell people that in season 7 of a conquest show, or do we not blind change, but condense, a heavy condensation? Heavily condensed, let's shift them to be Syrax's eggs, so by season 2 of the revived franchise, we can tell audiences the main point of the twist, they really descend from Balerion. I can see why a rational person would make that condensation. Just thinking, I was really angry about this at first, and I thought about it and went, oh, yeah, the colors are wrong. So, okay, first off, they got the colors right, so it's not negligence. And in thinking on it realistically, what are we going to do? Wait 15 full years for this? So the theme of this video, though, I said those are just the first 2 points. The main theme, which I'm getting to now, the important part, isn't even, is this a change or not? Are these Daenerys' eggs or not? Is this an intentional change in adaptation or just fan speculation? Does this change make sense? I hate it when people just go, oh, I assume Bran is a time-traveling Night King or something. What matters is authorial intent. And in this case, the intent of the author, in this case being Ryan Gondal. Is this a change you made on purpose, or were you just sloppy and the fans are substituting in their own speculation as rationalizations? That happened a lot in late Game of Thrones, where it's just, they just kind of forgot that Dany didn't think of the Iron Fleet. And then people would actually try to come up with character explanations for things that they didn't put thought into that were mistakes. Was this an intentional, thought-out, weighed change that they gave justification for? Case in point, the direct comparison, I realize, is to the way that Ryan Condal just 2 weeks ago handled the backlash to changes the TV show made to the Blood and Cheese assassination. That they toned it down a bit from the books, that it's mostly off camera, that they didn't force it to be the sadistic choice than killing the other one. And Condal publicly acknowledged this is a change, and then he gave a long-form explanation of why he made this decision. Multi-point, actually, that it's incredibly hard to do this with young child actors, and we'd have to change some of it to begin with, might alienate the audience, we didn't want to destroy Helena as a character completely, the big thing was child actors, and so he gave a long-form multi-point response in multiple venues, 3 major ones, and in print publications, and the third one, though, was he went to not just the media, he went to book fan site, Westeros.org, did a full podcast with them in which he was directly asked, this is different, and he gave his explanation, this is why I justify this is a necessary change in adaptation. And he talked about it for a full 10 to 15 minutes. And in more fully gave his full explanation that he'd been saying to the text interviews of, this is why I did this. Compare this with how Game of Thrones Season 5 had the Sansa rape, which is a massive change, and they just didn't talk about it. They didn't even say, oh yeah, this isn't in the books. They just didn't talk about it. And going back to Season 1, whenever there were changes, they just, not only did they not justify the change, they wouldn't acknowledge the change, which is because they knew we don't want people criticizing because we didn't have a good reason behind it. Usually the reason was always we wanted to show off the actor. Season 2, Talissa, it was so bizarre, and the media should have jumped on them at the time, that we'd ask, why did you change Jane Westerling to Talissa? And they just go, what change? What are you talking about? The gaslighting of not even acknowledging the change, because they'd have to admit the real reason was Martin was so upset that this isn't the character I wrote. You've changed it into a generic romance. Can you at least change the name to acknowledge it isn't the character I wrote? And that it was a fight they had behind the scenes that they didn't want to explain why they really did it. Was we want to show off Richard Madden as a romantic lead in a generic romance. It just, everything was, we're showing off the actors. But it's the way that the media, they didn't talk about it, didn't even acknowledge it was a change. At best, for other things, they brush off, oh, we condensed it for time. Or some bizarre thing like that, that they did not sit down and give point-by-point explanations. We gave them the benefit of the doubt back in seasons 1 and 2 because we were the better men. We didn't want to be toxic fans. They took advantage of our trust. And then the media just completely dropped the ball, that you weren't even being journalists. You weren't holding them to account of, this is a change, why did you do that? I'm remembering, like, when they had that Jaime Cersei sex scene at the start of season 4 that was so rough it looked like rape, even though the actors admitted they didn't play it that way. If you freeze frame, you can see her leaning in for a kiss, that it wasn't, but it was so poorly filmed. And this is something they could have gotten out of. They could have just instantly gone on interviews the week that happened and said, oh, that's just, it's filmed really rough, and I guess the filming was confusing. No, they're not, we didn't intend it that way. That this was something they could have even avoided, because it genuinely, well, who wants to admit we filmed the sex scene so poorly it looks like rape? But the mental flashback, I have a clip of this on my channel where they just stopped giving interviews for a full year, and the next time they gave a public Q&A at Oxford Union, during the fan Q&A, a fan asked them, what was that? And it's just they were totally unprepared and managed to mumble their way through repeating the question back at her. He did that because we thought it was a thing he would do. And then just rolled their eyes at her and literally moved on. And my disgust is at the moderator of that no one asked about this, and they just stopped giving public there were no interviews anymore. It's just press conferences with their glorified mouthpieces. Direct contrast that we're scared of, and I think a lot of the reason I was angry is the emotional baggage of how whenever Benioff and Weiss made a change, they would not justify it, and eventually just started gaslighting us of, there was no change, what are you talking about? No, consistently Ryan Condal has admitted when he condensed or combined things or moved things around a little, and just 2 weeks ago there was a relatively big change up visually to Blood and Cheese, which I feel it still is in keeping with the tone of the book, that anything more dark would have scared off TV first viewers. The point is I accepted the change. Because he came out and very clearly admitted it happened, said, I stand by this change, and directly to both public and fan sites gave point-by-point responses. So I guess part of the reason I was so annoyed is after the episode aired, which could not, without time travel, it somehow confirm on screen, yes, this is Daenerys or not, and it was only very brief. I think the reason I was annoyed was because Condal didn't remark on it in the behind-the-scenes videos, which I realize is my fault, and I feel embarrassed that I'm being a toxic fan about this. Thinking on it, here's the point here. I was annoyed that Condal didn't come out and give a full explanation of this is a change the way he did for Blood and Cheese, which I respected. But I suspect what happened is Geeta Patel, who I still respect and really admire on this, the director got cornered by this question in interviews that people would ask, and instead of saying, you have to ask the showrunner that, I'm not a writer, said something really briefly, which is I don't blame her, but it's still mishandling it, that she jumped the gun on that by admitting it so early because she was cornered and the interviewers shouldn't have pressed her on that because that's a writer question. Like, why would you ask the director, are those Daenerys' eggs? Was she told to film the camera angle in such a way you know they're Daenerys'? No, she would never be asked that. So what I realized is they jumped the gun by pressing the director on it, and what was she supposed to say? And this is the point of the video. It's possible, if not probable, that Condal actually has a long-form defense of this change already, like, pre-recorded and waiting to release as a tie-in with episode 7 or something. It's almost comparable to if when the Blood and Cheese change happened, I was demanding, why isn't he giving a public defense of this literally 1 hour after the premiere aired, when he was within 2 or 3 days? You know? And the other thing is the way these interviews are edited, that Patel's answer seemed flippantly short in the Mashable interview. It was literally 1 line. But then, only a few days after that, she gave a longer and much more thorough interview in Screen Rant, which wasn't just sound bites. It was long, it covered a variety of topics, and she actually had multiple lines about this, about the eggs, that it led me to think that Mashable just clipped a longer quote that she actually gave the interviewer just to reduce it to one line. That wasn't her fault. That I felt good that Red Team Review and Preston Jacobs' own video about this voiced a similar view. They verbalized what I was feeling, that they specifically said, if you're going to make a change like this, it is something the showrunner should give a lengthy explanation for in an interview, pausing emphasis, not a one-sentence quote from the episode director as part of a longer interview. But it was so exciting that then all the other news sites, it went viral. You see it popping up in your feed. The director confirms it's one line. She said yes, and in Mashable, but she gave a better answer in Screen Rant. It's Mashable's fault. The attitude of it felt almost flippant, that why am I hearing about this as one line from the episode director? That they managed to verbalize that already, but turns out I think this was just a case of miscommunication through no fault of the director. It's the news site's fault. That I sympathize with Patel on this. That in the longer interview she gave a better answer. I think the interviewers just put her on the spot, when the better move, and I still respect her, but just let them know, the better move when that happens is you need to tell the interviewer, guys, I'm a director, not a writer. Please don't make me speak for the writers about what is clearly a writing decision. And don't even in the interview say, I decline to comment. Don't bring this up, because they're going to ask a writer that or something. So they put her on the spot, and we got annoyed at that response the past few days just because it's all tumbling out there, but the miscommunication of it. But Condal could be planning on a longer response. And that's not just wishful thinking. I feel so positive because this isn't wishful thinking. Oh, you're just hoping, honeypotting. Just 2 weeks ago, we got a textbook example of how to handle a change the right way in the media and to fans when they responded to the blood and cheese changes. That Condal is not someone averse to explaining why he made a change. That just everything he did with blood and cheese just 2 weeks ago, 2 episodes ago, leads me to think he would explain something like this. He just hasn't yet, but he's planning to. I'm not even asking for that much as he did for Blood and Cheese, where he did the interview circuit. Something like in the behind-the-scenes video for a subsequent episode, like a few episodes from now. If he acknowledges, yes, we know that it was implied to be Dreamfire in the other book, but it was never definitive, and we felt it was more important to establish this. It is a condensation, like 2 sentences. As long as he says something. I'd rather he gives the long-form thing again, but what I'm thinking of is even in the 20-minute House the Dragons Built making-of video for this episode, for episode 3, Condal quickly admitted the books don't explicitly state that Aegon the Conqueror had a full suit of Valyrian steel armor, but I think it's reasonable enough expansion that the Targaryens on Dragonstone had it as an heirloom from Valyria, that they kept it during the Century of Blood, the 100 years that they were hiding on Dragonstone between the Doom and the Conquest. And I think, yeah, it's a reasonable enough. And they do have a character stress, wow, this thing is worth an entire castle. Which it is. The idea that you have enough Valyrian steel to make a full suit of armor is incredibly expensive, but if you could plausibly say anyone would, maybe the Targaryens as Dragon Lords would have one such suit of armor as an heirloom from Aegon's time. I felt that was a reasonable change, and in 2 sentences he said, I know it's not explicit, but I felt it was reasonable enough that they could have. Something like that, at least. They might just be doing in a later episode. Though I'd rather he does the interview circuit again for something as big as where did Dany's eggs come from. So, in conclusion, to summarize all this, the 3 things here. First, in terms of plot mechanics with egg colors, maybe they just changed morning to be blue. Second, the main point would remain that Dany's eggs are the direct grandchildren of Balerion and Vhagar. But third, and most importantly, to verbalize this, I got upset that for such a big change, Condal didn't immediately go on the interview circuit to explain himself, And then just as it hit me like a truck, what if morning is just blue in the show? Hit me like a truck. The interviewers jumped the gun and pressured Patel. Condal is probably already planning to talk about this when I'm dancing around this, that we know from leaks that morning is going to hatch this season. Rhaenyra's dragon will hatch at some point later this season. We are not going to have to wait. In the books, it hatches in the end of the war, so we'd have to wait 2 years, probably 4, to get a definitive answer about this is not the last time we are seeing these eggs. It's not like, oh, they raised the possibility they're Daenerys's, but they're only going to find out about it 3 to 4 years from now when another season airs. Within the next 4 weeks, because I'm making this the day before episode 4, so guys, we only really have 4 weeks left in this season. We know there is going to be an episode within the next month where morning hatches. Probably going to hatch from the blue one. And if you think about it, would Condal make a lengthy behind-the-scenes comment or interview dedicated to this when we first see the eggs, or when morning hatches, or maybe when the eggs get lost on screen, like if they get stolen at sea when heading to Pentos or something, but they wind up in the Free Cities? That I just felt bad when I realized, because those inside the episode things are pre-recorded, we'd look quite the fools if it turns out he already recorded an explanation but was like saving it for episode 7 to tie in better when the eggs are much more prominent. Season isn't over yet, and particularly because we know morning is coming this season. So I felt a lot better about that just, if we jump the gun on this and raise a complete tirade, we would look so bad if it turns out Condal is already planning on an explanation within the next 4 to 5 episodes, because there's not that much left of season 2 because of the shorter runtime. So this isn't something where we have to go, you completely screwed up a plot mechanic in like Game of Thrones season 4 where you forgot to mention where is Tysha, and the media didn't follow through on it. Like, the eggs are going to come up again very prominently by the end of the season. So I'm advising a wait-and-see attitude. And the bigger part isn't just that they made a change, but how Condal handles it. I felt so much better after the way he handled Blood and Cheese that I think he will probably do that. So let's just wait for it and see what happens. Now, a separate question is what's going on with Nettles and Sheepstealer. I have addressed that in other videos. And I've said, well, I can't confirm this. I strongly suspect that actress Thuso Mbedu has been cast as Nettles, because she was seen around the set, she showed up to the red carpet premiere, and that she might have filmed one scene for, like, the finale, just to go, hey, Nettles is coming, but the full introduction is coming till season 3. Maybe. But the whole thing of, oh dear God, did they cut Nettles or not, that's an even bigger change in this. To me, this is just an extreme condensation for the sake of, do you want to let them know they're really Targaryen dragons 15 years from now, or now, by slightly shifting which specific child of Balerion they come from? I could even get behind that. The Nettles thing, though, and I've already said, like, that would diminish them so much, it's really not in their own interest. But it's a separate question. So, let's see. I think the next time we see Rhaena and the eggs, when morning hatches, that I know there's at least episode 7, possibly sooner, we're going to be seeing at least one of those eggs hatching and dealing with them more. Let's hear him out. Let's give Condal a chance to say something about it. He probably was planning on saying something about this well before the season ends.